Good evening and welcome to the 72nd round of Cairo Climate Talks. I'm honored to be the moderator of this panel discussion. I am Marwa Barakat, the urban development researcher and practitioner. Um, my work focuses on different aspects of human development policies and urban justice, um, mainly in the cities of Egypt and with some experience in some other contexts and cities in the MENA region, Sri Lanka and England. I currently work as the senior researcher at the Queen Integrated Community Development. For those of you who are not familiar with Cairo Climate Talks, I would like to give a brief introduction. So Cairo Climate Talks have been serving a platform uh, to exchange knowledge um, and experiences and raise awareness and foster cooperation between policymakers, businesses, the scientific community, and civil society. Climate Talks have addressed various topics in over 70 sessions that all fit into the impact of climate change and the environmental challenges um, that we face. So sessions topics have ranged from clean technology to food security to public health, energy, so many different topics. And today's discussion is on sustainable infrastructure, specifically post-COVID-19 passes to achieve the SDGs. We aim to introduce the concept of sustainability, equity, inclusivity, and resilience, and implication in the infrastructure planning sector. Also, we need to engage more people in the dialogue happening in Egypt around the prerequisites of sustainable infrastructure development in Egypt and unlocking the challenges and opportunities that emerge with the COVID-19 pandemic. Emphasizing the links between infrastructure planning, urban planning, and climate change, I would like to quote Peter Calthorpe in his very strong statement mentioned in the call you received for the event. We are solving for climate change. We are going to be building cities for 3 billion people. That's a doubling of urban environment. If we don't get that right, I'm sure that all the climate solution in the world would save mankind because so much depends on how we shape our cities. So in the light of that, we see that there is a pressing need to review the way we build our cities and provide urban infrastructure if we are serious about bettering our future. The results of many expert roundtables, policy papers, and in the conference Habitat 3 suggested that the increasing pressure of population growth make the efficient consumption of natural resources by infrastructure system absolutely essential. If conflict rooted in the issues surrounding equitable access and use of natural resources is to be understood and managed well. Also, seeking appropriate, affordable, and accessible services and infrastructure systems require a holistic approach to understanding, designing, planning tricks of infrastructure and services, as well as solidly linking infrastructure provision and urban planning. This will allow us then apply a proper risk management processes, taking appropriate mitigation measures to reduce vulnerability and strengthen resilience of infrastructure systems. As we all work toward achieving the strategic development agendas for the years 2030, both for Egypt and globally, we need to recognize this centrality of infrastructure systems. When we look at the SDGs, for example, sustainable infrastructure not only is the core of 4 goals out of the 17, namely Goal 6 on clean water and sanitation, Goal 7 on affordable and clean energy, um, Goal 9 on industry, innovation, and infrastructure, and Goal 11 on sustainable cities and communities. It also plays significant role in achieving most of the other goals, such as reducing poverty and inequalities and fostering good health and well-being. Despite progress, many people still lack proper access to basic services and infrastructure networks. The COVID-19 crisis magnified the implications of this. And so reinsured the significance of the urban lens, as estimates shows that over 90% of COVID cases in the world are living in urban areas. That means that we need to investigate urban communities and infrastructure in them with much more careful eye. Investigating the impacts of COVID-19 and the responses in the global level, national and local levels, can provide a great opportunity to map our needs more accurately and also to assess the capacity of our institutions to cooperate and work efficiently toward implementing sustainable development policies and agendas. For example, if we look at water and sanitation, 3 billion people worldwide lack basic hand washing facilities at home. And this is the most efficient method of COVID-19 prevention. And 40% health facilities suffer from relevant issues. Climate change also contributes to threats facing vulnerable groups, as 7,000 million people might face displacement due to water scarcity by 2030. Similar drastic impacts can be measured when looking at the environmental, social, and economic challenges proposed by the current infrastructure systems and modalities of energy, transportation, roads, and industrialization. The crisis also shows the need for increasing investments in the small-scale industries and systems that cater to the majority of the population of the development countries in order for them to survive through the crisis. In Egypt, historically, and throughout the modernization of infrastructure sectors, the main strategic goal has been increasing coverage rates of infrastructure networks like water, sanitation, energy, transportation, and others. This goal, while not covering totally important aspects such as quality, affordability, efficiency, resilience, but still it fulfills the core social equity principle, which is leaving no one behind. However, most recently, we can see a shift towards prioritizing new urban communities, mega infrastructure projects nationwide. This approach, while responding to future demand and enable the national strategic development vision, it might easily overlook the local needs in the urban settlements where most of the population lives. It is crucial to integrate the historic city, the informal settlements that contain a total of 60 to 70% of the urban population in Greater Cairo alone, and the vast pre-urban peripheries. Through a holistic, long-term, demand-based approach of infrastructure planning on the metropolitan level, rather than looking at separate parts of the city, like new communities and slum upgrading or informal settlements upgrading projects, and working with each project as separate from the whole city. We also need to engage in a dialogue on how to reform institutional, legal, and administrative frameworks in order to enable better planning, financing, and management of sustainable infrastructure systems. Many actors are working relentlessly to foster innovation in the different sectors of infrastructure, and there is much to learn from the new practices in Egypt and worldwide. We simply need to build on these experiences and expertise and engage all actors toward improving current systems. Cairo Climate Talks today gathers four respectable panels addressing the issue from different perspectives. Our agenda starts today with welcome remarks, followed by panel discussion, and then we will have 15 minutes to address your key questions proposed in the Q and answer section. Please find the icon for questions and answers, Q&As, below in your screen. So for those who just joined us, please check the German language option in the invitation for the Arabic translation. من فضلكم لو أي حد لسه جاي، بس في العلامة بتاعة الكرة الأرضية تحت موجود فيها ترجمة فورية بالعربي، لكن هتختاروا الأوبشن بتاع اللغة الألمانية عشان تسمعوا الترجمة العربي. شكرا. Now I welcome Mr. Philippe Maupai, the head of the science department. Sorry if I mispronounced that. The head of the science department at the Embassy of the Federal Republic of Germany in Cairo. Hello, Mr. Philippe.
Hello, thank you very much, Marwa. Thank you very much for this excellent introduction and also this excellent pronunciation of my last name. Thank you.
Thank you.
And good evening to all of you. It's my great pleasure to welcome you all to the last CCT of this year of 2020. It's CCT number 72, as you just mentioned. And as you all know, it's been quite a challenging year for all of us, but I'm really happy we managed to switch the CCTs fully to virtual. So even though we're all focusing on COVID right now, and I think it's going to be on our minds for the months to come, it's really crucial for us to also continue raising awareness about climate change and about environmental protection. And this is a topic that is more important now than ever. And I'm really grateful to all of you and the entire CCT team, our partners at DAAD, at GIZ, JCWE, and especially the Ministry of Environment, for making 2020 a successful year for CCT through this mostly virtual events in the year. And I want to thank you, Engineer Samah, Saleh, for joining us today for the ministry. So I'm very happy that we're managing to meet even though this is virtually. And one really important, thank you. One really important group that we have with us also today are our friends from the press. Thank you for your presence and your participation in our events. And I just wanted to remind everyone, and especially you, that we right now are calling for submissions for the 2020 CCT Environmental Journalism Award. So please submit your works about environmental issues published in Egypt until the 16th of December. You can find more information on Facebook, and we will award 5 winners with prizes, and the prizes, tablets, will be given to the winners by our ambassador in early 2021. So I think that's something to look forward to for all of us. So thank you to you. But let's return to today's topic. And I think, Marwa, you've done a wonderful introduction, so I don't need to go into the details. But yes, sustainable infrastructure and post-COVID-19 path to the SDGs. And this is a really important topic. And I think infrastructure projects are indeed important for every country, and especially countries like Egypt with growing populations. But we have to make sure not to compromise the environment that we equally need to survive. So I'm really excited to find out more about how to plan for sustainable infrastructures to make our cities ready for tomorrow. And I'm really happy that today we have such an exciting panel from such German-Egyptian organization. I think if we had said we want organizations and panelists that best represent German-Egyptian scientific and research corporation, we couldn't have had a better panel. So thank you to all of you for joining our panel tonight, and thank you to you, Marwa, moderator. So
thank
with
you,
this,
Philippe.
No, thank you very much. Thank you to all of you. And yeah, with this, I just want to wish you an excellent discussion. I'm really looking forward to that. Have a great debate, and also happy holidays to all of you, and hope to see you next year. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Philippe. Happy holidays. So now we will have the welcome remarks by Mrs. Samah Saleh, the manager of the Sustainable Development Unit at the Ministry of Environment of Egypt. Hello, Samah.
Hi, how are you? Thanks, Mr. Marwa. Thanks for the CCT team. Thanks, Mr. Francois. I'm so happy to be with you today. Yes, we have a problem with pandemic, but I think we can cope through, and we are continuing. Maybe I'm so proud to tell that Egypt, although of everything, we are taking a very aggressive policies for going in sustainable development. Although of all challenges we have, that actually be true by cooperation with Ministry of Planning and Economic Development. Actually, we are, maybe you heard in last couple of weeks that the cabinet is guaranteed the government will push amount budget from the national budget. From this year is 15% from our national budget for the environmental investment and projects to the double to be 13 for the next financial year. This for me it's a big progress that we have a problem in as all world have because of the pandemic, but this I think aggressive commitment from the government give us for me it's a golden opportunity to solve the problems which we are talking about in the infrastructure or any problem related to the sustainable development. Actually, we are saying the financial resources. So actually we had from now a certain budget. We are with the cooperation with the Ministry of Planning, putting our agenda for what the hotspots, what the unsustainable pattern we have to stop, what we're starting with for this year till 2030. The most interesting thing that not only this amount of money who will push for the environmental project, but all the projects which asking for a funding from the national budget, it will be reviewed from the concept of sustainable development. So all the urban, and actually the dialogue has been started, and there is an capacity building program will start by this month. All the projects coming from the Ministry of Housing will be reviewed from the perspective of the sustainable development principles for all projects. So they have to calculate the carbon footprint for their project from the phase of implementation till after the project is done and using by the community. It's not that easy, but actually we are optimistic that we are going to do it by the capacity building for the governmental bodies. We are looking for how to, we are not in this phase, we are thinking how to engage the private sector. I know the private sector to be in that kind of techniques and modules for sustainable development in urban planning, in all for all developer is not easy, but the government thinking about how to get them to encourage them to join us. But actually what I'm happy that the government start for first time by themselves. So we will do it by for our project to engage other like private sector or the civil society to share in this policy. Sorry if I'm taking more than the time allowed to me, but I'm actually want to share this with you for our future. As you speak, yes, we have a problem. We are big country. We have a historical problem, but I think by good thinking and the planning in the future, we will going to know how to make for the existing urban areas and what we are going to for the new settlement and the new cities. Thank you. Thanks, and I hope for you a very fruitful discussion. And I hope I can join you till the end of the discussion.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Samah. Thank you for your brief introduction to what the government is doing. Of course, it's very important to acknowledge what is happening right now in Egypt, and also to recognize the potentials and opportunities to build on. And I think this is the spirit that we want to start this talk with. So without any further additions, I will be introducing my panelists today. Welcome with me, Mr. Walid Abdurrahim. He is the Deputy Director of the Cairo office of the German Development Bank, KfW, which has been involved in the financial cooperation in Egypt for decades and implementing major reforms and development programs in water and energy sectors. Before joining KfW in 2001, Mr. Abdurrahim headed the environmental studies teams in prominent consulting firms such as the Egyptian Pacer and the Deutsche IWACO. Hopefully I'm not mispronouncing this. He also worked as an advisor to the Egyptian Environmental Affairs Agency for 3 years. Hello, Mr. Walid. Very nice to have you on board.
Thank you.
Yeah. Next, I have Mr. Francois Mangulet. He is the cluster coordinator for urban development at GIZ Egypt and the head of the BMZ EU, the European Union. Co-funded capacity building through urban infrastructure development project. He is an impressively experienced development practitioner and certified public affairs specialist who is affiliated to numerous professional networks such as the International Society of City and Regional Planners. His work focuses on institutional building in Pan-African contexts, local governance, decentralization, urban upgrading, housing, sustainable livelihood, and economic planning. Before Egypt, he worked in Germany, Ghana, Ivory Coast, South Africa, Cameroon, and Mali. Very happy to have you on board, Mr. Francois. Thank you for joining us and welcome.
Thank you so much. I
Thank
appreciate
you. Next, we have Dr. Hiba Abul Fadl. She is an associate professor in the Department of Architecture, Faculty of Fine Arts, Alexandria University. She is also the academic coordinator for the double master program, Urban Design Revitalization of Historic City Districts. It's a collaboration between Cairo University, Alexandria University, and Brandenburg Technical University in Germany. Her work focuses on heritage, housing, urban revitalization, and small cities strategic planning, among topics. Welcome, Dr. Hiba, and
thank you so much.
Good
Thank
to
you,
have
Marwa.
you today.
It's great to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Then we have Dr. Hassan Al-Mulhi. He's a senior researcher at the Habitat Unit, the International Urbanism and Project Leader at the Urban Development Department at TU Berlin campus at Gona. His research focuses on culture and urban informality, patterns of use in urban space, priorities of informal settlement development projects, and power relations within informal communities. He also teaches several master's courses in architecture and urban design in TU Berlin, Gona. Welcome, Mr. Dr. Hassan, and nice to have you.
You're welcome. Thanks, Marwa, for this invitation and nice introduction. Nice to be here.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Hassan. Okay, so now it's time to start our panel discussion. Hopefully it will be very fruitful and will provide you a lot of knowledge and ideas for the future. So my first question will be for Dr. Hiba Abul Fadl. So I want you to introduce to the audience the linkage between infrastructure planning and urban planning and upgrading at the city level, and how we can utilize these planning processes to promote sustainability and resilience.
Yes, thank you, Marwa. As we all know, urban planning is a complex technical and political process. So it deals with a lot of aspects in the city, not just one aspect, like, for instance, uses in distribution of uses in the city and the services, along with the infrastructure, along with other issues related, multidisciplinary issues related to the city. Of course, infrastructure is one of these issues. So infrastructure planning is under the umbrella of the city planning. It is it is quite linked to it directly. We cannot plan a city without these aspects. Of course, to have a sustainable, when setting plans, we usually calculate depending on the densities of population and their needs for infrastructure and capacity of sanitation and electricity and so on, and of course roads and networks and transportation and so on. And this kind of planning is not just for current density and populations, but also for future generations. And always a plan is set for future generations. Maybe a plan for 10 or 15 years is put, and taking in consideration also by safety that can cover the growth for the future generation. Urban plans are not also static. They are not just introduced and then stop, but also every 10 years another plan is introduced, and so on and so forth. So each time it is introduced, it introduces the challenge that is there and how the new plan can go with it. As for sustainability, as we can see, it is embedded in urban planning. And it, with each plan set, it goes through, it heads for providing a good quality of life for its inhabitants, the city's inhabitants, taking in consideration all sustainable efforts. Resilience is also a very important, urban resilience, an important issue in introducing to urban planning of the city. And well, it is of course the ability to plan for certain stressors that might exist on cities, like what we are having now, like the pandemic, or any other climate change, or even a certain sudden growth of population, which will affect the city and its inhabitants. So all these factors should have plans to deal with such issues. Of course, it can be taken into account by applying different strategies of infrastructure, like taking into account setting the infrastructure in ducts and so on underneath, which wasn't the case, of course, in Egypt. Each time something happens, you always find the streets are open, the pavements are dug, and so on. But now, with new technologies and ways to introduce new infrastructure, is taken in consideration in new cities and development.
Thank you, Dr. Heba. I would like to follow up with you with another question regarding the planning aspect, which is like, how does the Egyptian government plan infrastructure provision for different spatial typology? Like, what differences can you see between, for example, typology like informal settlement or historical cities upgrading, and new settlements and urban communities, and which groups of the population or which areas of the city do you think are the most affected by the system's deficiencies, if there's any, and why?
Well, I have to admit that urban planning should provide facilities and basic needs for all of the inhabitants, for all of the inhabitants, not necessarily there is a difference between any of them. But in the case of Egypt, I think there is an issue that has to be cleared. When applying infrastructure to planned areas, it is very easy to apply it for all citizens. But when coming to informal settlements, there is an issue that is always faced, that the government, because the area is unplanned, just gets the infrastructure to a certain point outside the informal settlement, and thus the inhabitants starts to complete the infrastructure inside the area, and this is where things go wrong. So because it's unplanned area, it is very difficult to introduce infrastructures in the area, especially sanitation. And this is where things really go astray, especially for health issues. Nowadays, the government is taking in actions, as we can all see, that instead of developing the areas as it is, they start moving the areas to new built communities, and they are removed completely and starting all over so that they can implement infrastructure in a proper planned way. So this is, I hope this answers your question.
Yes, of course. Thank you, Dr. Heba. I just need to comment on the last part of your answer, which is about the new approach of a relocation of the people in informal settlements, and just point out that it's only happening for the unsafe areas, but we have another issue of unplanned areas in Egypt that are estimated to be more than 70% of the urban fabric, and this is the actual this is the actual problem. I would actually
I have to kick in on this. I have to, because I was already
okay, but very quickly because I want to
okay, because I was with ISDF with the issue of unplanned areas, and this was long ago, and it was already finished. But now, what is happening now, they are removing informal settlement area, like in Alexandria, for instance, Bashair al-Khair, and areas like in Izbit Sayadin. These are all removed, and they are already built and relocated. So it's not just
Thank you. Okay, so moving to Dr. Hassan Mulh, drawing from your work in investigating the priorities of urban development in Cairo's informal settlements, and in the light of what Dr. Heba just said about unplanned and unsafe areas or informal settlements, what is defined as informal settlements? This is a huge question, but let's say that informal settlements for now are the unsafe areas. So what is your assessment of the current approaches that Dr. Heba has presented and the provision of infrastructure in these upgrading projects? And also, please, would you recommend your insights for sustainable, equitable, and inclusive infrastructure?
Okay, thanks Marwa, and thanks Heba for your insights and introduction about the topic. I think, okay, first I will just very quickly highlight the difference between the unsafe and unplanned. So the unsafe areas, they are relocated, and the unplanned areas, they need to be developed as they are, like in situ or where they are, okay? So starting with the national vision, I think dealing with the unplanned areas is not yet clarified or decided. So there are several attempts by SDF, of course, the Informal Settlement Development Fund, and most of their interventions are physical interventions, so providing infrastructure or even uplifting the facades of the residential areas, and that's it. So the development as a general approach is not really covered, and not really covering different sectors like social development, economic development. This is not really considered. And I would say also, coming back to the infrastructure, of course, we're talking about the technical infrastructure, which is the sewage networks and the water supply, and also social infrastructure, which are the services. So providing schools, health services, whatever kind of services that are provided by the government to the public, this sometimes also is considered as part of the infrastructure, okay? So talking about the technical, like the sewage networks and electricity and so on, of course, you mentioned that the people do it by themselves, which is actually not really done in a proper way, which actually leads to many negative consequences. This is one point. And we also have to consider that the quality of the infrastructure available. So even sometimes in some water network is there, but the pressure is so low and the quantity of water is so low because it was not planned to serve the area with a high density. So the number of users is much higher than the design of the network itself. So this is another issue. Also considering the quality of water itself. I mean, we're talking about the quality of the network. This is something, and also the quality of the product, which is the water. Sometimes it's also not really up to the standards. However, when it comes to through my research in 2014 about culture and informal urban development, and later confirmed also in the informal settlements development priorities research, I think stakeholders have different perspectives and different agendas when it comes to reaching a win-win situation in any development intervention, which is a very critical process and needs a really good kind of management and facilitation and mediation when it comes to how to make this really happen and function and sustainable. In some cases, some of the projects I would mention, Manshait Nasser, for example, Cairo, GIZ work. They had several phases. So the first phase, the second phase, which ended I think 2008, the second phase. By visiting the projects introduced in the first phase, there was one building of the local NGOs. Actually, it's empty right now. I mean, the NGOs' names are there, but it's not really functioning. So I would say, okay, such projects need somehow to be revisited and evaluated so we can reach kind of lessons learned from not only from success stories, but also from our failures. And of course, it's very difficult for an organization to, I mean, at the moment of finishing a project, it's a success story. But then, I mean, how can we learn from that if we don't visit after 10 years to measure the impact of such interventions? I would say it's important.
That's the great question. A great questions. Thank you, Dr. Hassan. Thank you for bringing up the GIZ work in Egypt. And I would like to ask Mr. Francois as part of the team of GIZ, and how do you assess Dr. Hassan's what Dr. Hassan's brought up as the results of GIZ interventions, and specifically about engaging active stakeholders and the effect of that on sustainability and resilience in cities, and specifically in informal settlements, which is the spatial focus of your program of participatory development.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I mean, I can't agree more with what Hassan is saying. That's indeed, when you go and look at the building, you see the name, but inside you don't have the NGO and so on. We're talking about the visible part of this sustainability that we want to see. But our approach is merely, I mean, we have a human focus when you talk about sustainability. Human focus means that we are applying ourselves seriously on the notion of capacity development when we get into an area, because the magnitude of the challenges that have been spelled out in your introductory kind of remarks, it's tremendous. It's incredible. So we are no longer in the era where we trying small pilots, and then we raise the flag to say this is a success and that's it. We are in the era where it is very important to make sure that we improve the development literacy of the demand side. With the demand side, I mean the people that are staying in those areas, be it in the organized networks like civil society networks, but also the local administration. So when I say we have a human focus, is for me to say, it depends on what kind of public management culture you are applying here. If you look at people just like clients that are at the receiving ends of services which are provided by an entity, if this is your paradigm, obviously there is not so much you can expect later on, many years later, if you want to see some kind of changes that you have ignited being sustained. But if you look at people as co-producer, okay, co-producer of public goods, then from the onset, you start addressing the development literacy issues, starting with the planning that we're talking about. We have a very um, structured planning methodology, which start with the identification of needs, right? Going right through to the analysis of the cause and effect relationships. This is a school in itself. And this is a school of, for instance, local democracy, where people really get to understand how do the problems that we find at the local level, the problems, the day-to-day problems that they are having, relate to one another, and how do you go about solving them. And it is not that the solution will only come from an entity which is coming extra, but with them. It has to be done together with them. So that's why in addressing the issue of sustainability, we always have to interrogate the people who have gone through these experiences. So the change is not just only the visible change that you see in the building, the change is in the life stories of the different people. How have they moved up the ladder? But the problem, why the building is empty, it might be that the local authority doesn't have enough financial means, right? It might be a problem related to the fact that the framework conditions for the NGO to operate, is prohibitive for them. Hence, they have to move to another area and so on. So that's why I'm saying it's a holistic process, but at the center, we have to put the narrative right from the very beginning. We are talking about people, individuals and organized people, but we're also talking about the institutions that represent them.
Mhm.
So when we put a focus on it, we have to also change the way we read change. That this
Okay.
change, when the people have the ability, the possibility, the means, and so on, the kind of school that they went through to transform their lives and the environment,
Mhm.
it's something that we have to interrogate as well.
Uh, Thank you. That's a very elaborate and good answer for the question. It actually covered more questions that I had for the panel. Um, um, from that, would you build on that and introduce us or explain to us the linkage, the links between decentralization and local good governance and achieving the sustainability goals? Like how to empower, like you mentioned, that the local governments might need to change the narrative, but also they also need capacity building. They also need to adapt to local needs in a way that make the people the center of their development, but also contribute to the national and global strategic goals. So how do you see this issue? And do you think this decentralization might be the answer?
I think decentralization, I mean, first of all, when we look, for instance, at Egypt, we see around 100 million, population. And then you have just about 6.7% or 8% of the territory, or the national territory. All this, the whole population staying on 6.8% of national territory. And then there is a need. I mean, when you talk about, we take the urban settlements, and this pressure that we're talking about, the demographic pressure that is being exerted on infrastructure that has been built maybe some 30, 40, 50 years ago, is something, when it goes on and goes on and go on, it becomes more expensive to let this concentration, you know, be the main kind of development, where you drive development. So decentralization, if you consider the network of cities that are available, and that you create the conditions for this increase in population to be evenly distributed across a network of cities, which means what are the conditions that must be available for, you know, the people to see a need to move, instead of coming to Cairo, to go to let's say Bahira, to go to Asyut, and so on and so forth. So the frame conditions that you need for that to happen. So basically, I think decentralization in some way is important, but we cannot talk about it as a panacea. It's not something that will solve all sort of situations. In fact, decentralization has to be tied to the, you know, administrative and political traditions of a country, to say what do we want to make out of it, but not to sell it just as a solution that is going to solve all the problems, because the problems have to be solved by the people. Now, but why is decentralization important? It's important. It's a process whereby powers and mandates and resources are being reorganized from the central government towards the subnational entities. And this is a very important process, because even though you want to have a certain uh, adequate distribution of the population across the cities, those cities and local government must have the means. They must have, first of all, have the mandate. They must have the capacity. They must have the resources to be able to create the necessary infrastructure and the services that can accommodate this extra population.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, we can say decentralization is important. It's very important in order to create the conditions for a balanced territorial development, which does not put too much pressure on one or two single spots to a level where it becomes difficult to solve problems, because the cost of concentration are always much higher.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you have to remove people and relocate, and if you were talking about, you just said something about 70% of the population staying in unplanned areas, and if you have to retrofit all the settlements that are informal, in which 70% of the population stays, where will the money come from?
Mm-hmm.
And we can talk about money, but we should also talk about the social networks that are broken, and so on and so forth. So definitely decentralization is important. Local governance, just to finish your questions, answering your question, local governance is therefore the way in which the local entities, the subnational government, local government, how they organize the mandates and the powers and the resources that have been allocated to them in a way that
Okay.
the population is part of it, and so on.
So,
It's a
Mr. Francois, I would come back to governance and engagement of the population and participation in general, but I need to go back to a very important point that you mentioned, which is thinking of the cost of the development approach, and thinking of rather than for the people to move to one city rather than and centralize and pour all of the investments and resources in city. We need to think of all settlements, all human settlements, and I think in this regard we need to highlight the need for holistic infrastructure planning. Like, what do you think is the way for Egypt to enhance their the planning systems to have this holistic infrastructure planning approach that looks at the metropolitan level and the regional level, and focuses on reducing inequalities of the city as a whole and increasing efficiency of the city as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, you see, there are two processes that have to come together. The top down and the bottom up, they have to come together. And if you are looking at the national level, ideally, you will see the national level setting policy directions, creating the rules of the game through the regulations, but also providing the resources, in an equitable manner across local governments, but also being there as a mentor and an advisor to local government, right? And being responsible for the type of infrastructure, which is like harbors, like ports, like dams, like bridges, highways, waste treatment plants, and all. But when it comes to the urban settlements, the subnational entities, we are talking about how to make a city livable for its entire population, right? And therefore, it is very important, and I will come to a point which is very close to the way in which we work. We work, in an area-based fashion. When we look at the whole city, we take an area, and in that area, we try to make sure that the needs assessment takes place, and we start with what is needed in terms of social infrastructure, the health facilities, your schools, your playgrounds, your markets, your access roads, and sanitation, and so on and so forth, waste management. This neighborhood level type of infrastructure, which makes an area livable for the people and which makes them committed to stay in that area. This is something that is very important. But now when you talk about citywide process, the city has to provide the framework, within which this area-based development needs to take place, and make sure that it fits into a strategic city planning framework. But the essence of it is that it must be participatory. It must involve stakeholder management, because people are coming, institutions are coming, organizations are coming with different agendas. You need to reconcile it, like Hassan was saying before. And you need to make sure that the aspect of socioeconomic development is seriously addressed, because the reality of an urban dweller is not just, I want services. The reality of an urban dweller is also a reality of, I want employment, because urban areas are areas where you have a cash economy. So if you don't have cash, you cannot survive. So you have to address the issues related to social services infrastructure, but also how to enable these people to have a foothold in the economic networks of the urban area. So that's in a nutshell. It is important to really, the type of infrastructure we're talking about when we come to city level infrastructure. When we come to a metropolitan area, we also need to know the type of infrastructure we're talking about, and the framework, the dynamics that need to come, the role distribution between the different actors. So this, I will.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Francois. So I would like to shift the conversation a little bit towards the SDGs and the agenda, the strategic development goals. My question will be for Dr. Hassan al-Mulhi, and building on what you, Dr. Heba, and Mr. Francois had said, how do you think we can ensure that the actual practices and processes that are happening on the ground are reflected in these agendas? in the on the national level, on the global level? How do you think these agendas can see the people and the modalities and the systems they are living with, and all the aspects that Mr. Francois has mentioned?
Sorry, I
Yes,
was
Dr.
muted.
Hassan,
Yeah.
mute. Yeah, thank you.
So, okay, so I think first we have to agree that the local governments are aware of their problems and issues. So they know, like every day they go to work trying to deal with those issues every day. So at the same time, I think the SDGs, although it seems to be a top-down, like on a global level, like from the very top of the world, but they are actually driven also from working with different countries. So they're somehow linked. I wouldn't say, I mean, I wouldn't agree that it's very, I mean, it's generic and it's applicable everywhere, but of course, it is possible to like to rely on it as a guideline for working on the ground. So when it comes to the local governments, I think they need to have a clear vision about their reality and its complexities, and discuss it with the stakeholders to reach a win-win situation, as mentioned before, in different plans. And they also need somehow to get the political support. I mean, if they know that the political will is to let them implement or localize SDGs somehow as a guidance for them. I mean, in the Egyptian case, for example, we have on the national level, we have the SDS, the Sustainable Development Strategies, Egypt Vision 2030, which is actually being revised currently. So there was a version which was released, I think, 2 years ago, but now they are revising it. And the pillars of the SDS is actually directly linked to the SDGs. So it's so on the national level, it's there, but still the gap is, I mean, to reach the local level. I would mention again the GIZ as an example. I mean, we are working closely together actually in this field. So in Egypt, we arranged through a GIZ grant, transformation, I think grant, yes. And we arranged several workshops actually targeting the localizing SDGs and in the Egyptian cities. And so we had like different, I think, eight or nine cities represented through different stakeholders. So governorate departments, like urban planning and monitoring, even the UU, urban upgrading units, besides to civil society, NGOs, also academics, professors and students. So through the City Works, which is actually a toolbox also established or developed by the GIZ, we try to introduce the SDGs to those locals representing their cities. So we had 8 groups, each group with representatives from the city, and we had gone through the different tools using SDGs and letting them prioritize their issues for the city and map those priorities on the city map and start to think, okay, the data needed to tackle this, what kind of projects, and even action plan. I mean, the process itself. And at the end, they were so glad that they could do the exercise after just learning it, and they just knew a technique how to organize the way they think, because the knowledge, they have it. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Hassan, for this valuable comment. This brings me to Mr. Or Engineer Walid Abdurrahim. Hello, Mr. Walid. I want to build on what Dr. Hassan has said and ask you about international cooperation. As the deputy manager of the KFW in Egypt, I think you have a very insightful ideas about how the international cooperation can have a bigger role in supporting strategic planning practices in Egypt, and how to ensure sustainability through your work and through GIZ work and all like the German organizations in Egypt, but also other international organizations.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, first of all, thank you for having me today among this, all these great panelists. When it comes to development cooperation, and specifically with Germany, I mean, to be specific, you know very well that we are working together with GIZ. It's like two arms implementing this development cooperation, financial and technical cooperation. And we have we had in the past, and we are still cooperating with GIZ in implementing some projects. One of them was this Manshet Nasser famous project, which was mentioned in the past. Now, to your question, you see, I mean, how does it work, this development cooperation? It's we have certain areas where we are allowed to work in or should focus on. The major two focal areas of coordination is water and energy. These are the two ones. And then the third one, of course, which is very important, and we see that it will take more in the future. This is related more to job creation and SME development and so on. So the two governments agreed long time ago to focus on these three areas when it comes to the German and Egyptian development cooperation. And every year they discuss, and there is a commitment for new projects. Now, the mechanism is that we have to check this project, we have to appraise it, we have to make sure that it will work. Sustainability is a very big question that we have to clearly check before going into the project itself. And what came recently after the adaptation of the vision and SDS, it became one of the how we call it. We have to find the linkage between the proposed project and the Egyptian long-term plan. It has to be there somehow, embedded or clearly mentioned. So then the whole thing, the appraisal report, goes to the German Ministry of Development and Economic Cooperation to give us a green light to continue. So none of our projects is far from what Egypt needs and planned for, while still this is there. We, as I said, one of the main questions we have to ask, or we have to make sure about, is the long-term sustainability of the project. Otherwise, the risks are too high, and then we cannot jump in.
Okay. So in your planning for long-term sustainability, do you think the infrastructure systems in Egypt are efficient in those terms, like in terms of management and consumption of natural resources, for example, and the balance between the demand, the increasing demand, and the environmental preservation, and all of these aspects? Do you think that the current infrastructure systems and frameworks are efficient in addressing these issues?
Okay.
And how to enhance them, of course.
Yeah. The short answer is no.
Okay.
No.
So how to enhance this? How to build on what is
but
existing?
Then the details. I mean, listen. In Egypt, if you compare the how we call it, the installed infrastructure in Egypt, if we compare Egypt with the surrounding countries, or even countries worldwide with the similar economy, you will find that actually we have advanced a lot. We have the installed capacities of different needed infrastructure. We are front runners, I have to say. The management of this, I have to say there is great room for improvement. I mean, improve their efficiency. And I have to add also that I mean, this efficiency is getting better during the last few years. Um, am I afraid of this? No, things are changing dramatically. I mean, I have a very good example to mention, and I will do it quickly. We are currently together with GIZ, the Swiss and the EU financing a solid waste management program. We are not focusing on the investment part of it. I mean, it's not about supplying, some trucks and machines and so on, but it's about a great reform. I will not mention the details on what happened, but during the last 2 years, a lot had took place to make sure that the future investment in this sector will be sustainable. It was not in the past, I have to say. I mean, machines go in and then they stop after maximum 2 years, and then supply of new machines come in and so on. It was hilarious. So this is a development, and it's only an example. I mean, I don't know. I don't want to take too much time, but it's an example of
yes,
I mean, there is progress. I have to say there is great progress.
And also following the partnership between the KfW and the Egyptian government, I have noticed there are also major projects in the sectors of water and energy. And this shows a great potential and opportunities for development in the future for more sustainable and eco-friendly infrastructure systems in Egypt. So, I think we need to highlight more what do you think is the potential that exists, for example, for expanding the renewable energy or strengthening city resilience in terms of facing crises like climate change, pandemics, stuff like that.
Yeah, okay. I mean, it's a good example that you mentioned, the renewable energy, and I can give you some details here. We started financing this in the mid-90s, actually, and it came with grants. That was a bit strange. Until now, we see, and I'm talking specifically about wind energy. I mean, you see a lot of them when you go to Ain Sokhna on the way to Hurghada on your right-hand side. The success story behind this is that the private sector started to invest in. So it attracted, I mean, it developed something in the country that attracted private sector to, I mean, and I think this is our main role. I mean, once this is done, it will run by itself. It doesn't need any more part of our finance. So we were focusing on this in the past with energy because it was, how we call it, competing with the, I mean, the cost of it was closer to traditional ways of energy production. Now coming the solar energy, specifically photovoltaic, and we might continue there for some time. Wind energy, I think we are satisfied, and we will continue with solar energy. And what is much important actually is energy efficiency, because we see that this is the this is the cheapest energy you can harness. It's there, but it's lost because of old machines and whatever. So this is another area that we are aggressively going in recently.
Okay, you have mentioned that the cost, and one of the main questions that are raised usually when talking about renewable energy or sustainability and efficiency of using environmental resources and natural resources is the high cost of these technologies and the increasing capacity building that is needed for implementing these kind of projects. So my question for you is about the efficient and innovative financial instruments, and to what extent do you think having innovative financial instruments in Egypt, and encouraging innovation in this sector can help promoting and mobilizing finance for infrastructure building.
Okay. On the first part, there is misconception that they are more expensive. You see, the calculation of the cost here is not about the capital cost. It's not about the first investment, but you have to see how much would this installation, this project, whatever, will cost along 20 years. So this includes also the operation cost. So when you have wind energy, you are doing simple maintenance, but there is no per se. I mean, the operation cost does not include any more like fuel, for example, or replacement of machines and so on. So that's why in 20 years, if you compare this with that, it becomes actually sometimes even cheaper. And on the long run, it's much better. So there is here, as I said, misconception in the calculation of the cost. The other thing which we sometimes use is the wrong installation or not wrong project. I mean, I would say traditional project, something that it's done and we think that we can cope with its negative impact. One has to calculate here what we call it the cost of environmental degradation. It costs something that harm the, I mean, it comes at the end on the people themselves. You have to put in the formula. There are many factors. One of them is the cost that we have to pay as a nation to treat someone who got, bad because of using, water which is not well treated, for example, or he has to live beside a factory which has emissions that will harm himself and his family. There is a cost there that it's hidden, but actually, in fact, we are paying this as a nation to treat. So then this has to come into also in the equation, and then you will find at the end. So whatever you do is actually much cheaper than keeping the situation as it is. When it comes to instruments, in 30 seconds, I would say we have different instruments. It's not only, by the way, financing government infrastructure. That's the majority, I have to say, goes to government infrastructure with, I explained before how it goes, but in the same time, we also agree with the government in many cases to channel finance through banks to specific cases like development of SMEs, because the impact of this, the positive impact, is sometimes much higher than targeting one or two large infrastructure.
Thank you
one
so
of the
much
instruments, by the way, that we are checking now, sorry, I will take another 10 seconds,
no,
is to provide a guarantee facility for those who cannot easily have access to finance from banks, because we know that Egyptian banks have high liquidity, at least in Egyptian pound, and but they cannot easily provide this finance to newcomers or small medium companies. So but if we can provide, and we can do this, a guarantee facility for these banks, then we open you put 1 million, you can mobilize 4 in this case, instead of putting 5 from our side. That's another instrument that we can do.
That's very informative answer. Thank you so much for this, and also thank you for answering one of the questions, the key questions that we received from our audience in the Q&As, which was climate-friendly constructions. What are they, and how do they contribute positively to climate? And I think through your answer to this question and the question before, Mr. Walid, you have already answered this question. Now we have listened to all panelists, And as I mentioned, we already moved to the A's because it's time for this part of the session. We have 3 questions that kind of include most of your questions. One of the questions have already been answered somehow. I hope so. Let us know if you don't agree. And I would like to target this next question to Dr. Hiba Abulfadl. The question is, what is the relation between our climate and the planned new cities and settlements? How do you think the link between planning new communities and new settlements, which is the scheme that is taking most of the investments of the government, of the Egyptian government, climate and climate change mitigation? Dr. Hiba, you are muted. Okay.
Okay, can you hear me now? I'm sorry. Well, I see the government policy is to start planning new communities in order to attract people and lessen the pressure on existing cities where there is a lot of issues concerning environment and pollution and so on and so forth. So by actually taking this action, in planning new communities and new cities, this will help in improving the air quality and the quality of life in general for the existing communities. Other than this, I can see that also the government is taking some actions in providing transportation that is eco-friendly, either through inside our cities, like I can see now in Alexandria, some buses are on the waterfront that is already buses, and also some buses connecting the city to new communities or new settlements like Alamein city, which is a new community, or Burj Al Arab city. You can go now to Burj Al Arab city with buses that are eco-friendly and uses natural gas. So I think it is put in consideration, taking these measures in designing the new communities in the initial thought of these new settlements.
Sorry, Dr. Hiba, there is also another question that is related to Alexandria and this question, but it's about the coastal cities and the protection of coastal cities from seasonal floods, and I would say from even more drastic impact of climate change in the future. It's a huge question, of course, so but I just needed to mention this question because it's very important to our topic.
Yes.
What do you think the measures the Egyptian government is taking in this aspect, in this regard?
Well, I cannot answer directly for it because this is a really big issue. Especially in Alexandria, there is a real problem of climate change.
If you will.
Yes, and the rise, the suggested or the rise of the water level eventually will happen. So I'm not really aware of such plans for the government for a city like Alexandria, but I would assume that there is other plans like moving people or taking care of people, relocating or so, but I really do not know any other plans to work on this kind of issues.
I don't know
We
any
are
plans either. So
we are
it's
already
good to have
facing
the question. It's good to have the question out there and
yes.
for people to think about it. And maybe in other dialogues in the future, we would have the opportunity to discuss such
I hope so.
important issue.
Uh,
The last question that we are discussing in this session.
The previous question.
Sorry. Yes, of course.
Yeah, actually, there is a big project implementing by Ministry of Irrigation. It's for protecting the coastal area. It's funded by GCF, yes, by the GCF, Global Climate Fund, Green Climate Fund.
Okay.
It's actually starting from 1 year and a half, and I think it's working on the infrastructure, protecting the coastal. I'm not aware of the details, but the fund is there, the project started, and it's communicate with all the stakeholder in Alexandria and at the central level and the local level in Alexandria.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Samah, for mentioning this. This is a very valuable information for all
great
of
to hear.
Action. Yes,
It's great
yes.
to
Thank
hear.
you so much, and please, everyone, if you are interested, check the project that Mrs. Samah has mentioned now. The last question, and we have 6 minutes. So I would love to have like 1 minute answer, 1 to 2 minutes answer from all the panelists to this question. It's actually concerning the COVID-19 and why would such a disease affect our way of planning while it is expected that it disappear in just few years. This is the question we received from the audience, and I would add to it the importance or significance of planning for disasters and crises in general. If I can have your final remarks on this issue from each speakers, starting Mr. Francois. This would be good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. This is a very important question. I mean, this is a new type of threats. Who would have believed that? I mean, if you were to be told 3, 4 months, 5, 6 months ago that we will always be wearing masks, we will be online, you know, to have such discussions, you wouldn't believe it. So, but basically, I think this is a new type of threats. Even if the COVID-19 disappears, who guarantees us that viral infections is not something that's going to surge again? So I think it's important to strengthen the resilience, especially of those that stay in overcrowded areas. And that's why I say human behavior is the essence of it. And when we know that we can strengthen the communities in the way that they behave in a preventative manner, so it's a great deal of contribution towards avoiding this kind of situation that obviously exposes a wide range of population. The design of infrastructure, obviously, in a manner that has to ease air circulation, in a manner that makes sure that these areas have water, you know, water for hand washing, in a manner that makes sure that people have the means to buy hydroalcoholic solutions, to buy masks and so on, by having access to job opportunities and so on. So this is a whole range of threats that reminds us that we need to be resilient, much more resilient, and strengthen the resilience of communities that are living, especially in informal settlements. And we should not consider this as, this was just a viral infection and it will go and so on. It's a new warning that we have to take seriously into account.
Thank you so much, Mr. Francois, and thank you for your commitment with the time. If Dr. Hassan can follow up on that.
Actually, Mr. Francois mentioned some of the things that I thought about, but I would continue on his answer. I think when it comes to the local communities, and I think in that sense, we're talking about local stakeholders, which could be NGOs or even local groups of residents, they have the ability um, to initiate things, to organize things on the local levels. And yeah, so they know their points of strengths and weaknesses. They know about the area, of course, and also they understand the local dynamics among different groups of stakeholders. So what they might lack in many cases would be financial resources, maybe technical knowledge, that can be provided through professionals, and like getting facilitators to help them somehow, show them how to, I mean, I'm talking about different aspects, like when it comes to implementation of any project on the local level, that might also include any type of health resilience kind of uh, preparing the public space in a certain way, or I don't know. I mean, I don't have specific examples in mind, but also this needs to be coordinated with the local authorities. So it's very important not to let them initiate whatever and then they do it, and then maybe this is contradicting. I mean, maybe it's illegal, so they need permissions to be able to implement it in a such a legal framework. I remember a case that happened in one of the governorates. I think it was Bahira. Local initiative, they organized like quarantine tent in the street, and they collected money. I mean, they could raise the fund, they could buy the equipment there, but then the local authority came and they had to demolish this setup because they were not informed and they didn't give them permissions. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you for wrapping up. So now, Mr. Walid, can you also comment on that?
Yeah, I can comment and also build on Hassan and Francois what they said. It's I will take your second part, which is not only about COVID, which might disappear, which might continue. We don't know, but we are talking about disasters that might come all of a sudden without enough prior
Yes.
notice, I have to say. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And you see in different incidents, without giving too many examples, but also COVID, when I compare our reaction in Egypt with other similar economies, and again countries around us with similar conditions, I find that we didn't do bad at all. You cannot compare what we did with European actions, yeah? But I'm talking about when we
other
compare
developing countries.
Yes, other development countries with, as I said, similar economies, I have to say. Mm-hmm. And this didn't surprise me, but I was not expecting that we would do that. I mean, we could handle the thing, and I remember in the past in one project that we found that we have when we have the resources, the surprise is that sometimes we find them. Yes, we don't see them every day, but we find them, and then we use them when there is a high emergency. When there is a serious emergency, we do. I cannot say we are resilient everywhere, and we are ready to cope with any sudden disaster. But what happened in different areas shows me that, you see, go back to what I said. We have the resources. We have the resources. We don't use them efficiently, but when we put our heads together because there is serious threat, yeah, it works. Yes.
Yes, thank you so much for mentioning that. It's really yes, we have a lot to learn from the government response to the COVID-19 and also the civil society, everyone. I think yeah, it might not look ideal, but we have a lot to learn about how to coordinate. People who are familiar with the problems of lack of coordination for example, between different sectors in the government or different institutions, people who are familiar with other problems that we always mention, strategic planning and infrastructure planning and other aspects of urban development, they will recognize how great coming together and collaborating to achieve some national goals regarding the COVID-19 prevention. So I think we need to build on this. I think I will have the final remark from Dr. Hiba before ending this event. Very fruitful and successful event from my perspective. I hope one thinks so. On what do you think, like planning can, the lesson that we can take from this response to COVID-19 into planning, specifically in relation to coordination?
Yes, I think I see very much an important issue in connection of people together via internet and implementing fiber optics and accelerating, pushing people into e-education, e-commerce, this COVID-19 forced us to do so very rapidly. In comparison that it would have gone okay in a couple of years, but it forced us into this for the COVID-19 issue. And this will eventually help us along the way to enter another phase also for sustainability, because as you all know, when we were sitting back in our houses, we already, some of us did the work via internet. So we don't have to go, we don't have to use cars, we don't have to, there is a lot of rethinking again which facilities can be used, which cannot, and things like this. So I think COVID-19 has already helped this in planning.
Thank you so much. I'm very happy with the outcome of this session today and this discussion. I hope all the panelists and also the audience, also Philippe and Mrs. Samah, thinks the same. I think it's important to bring more people, more actors to this discussion, and hopefully from the international agencies active in Egypt, from the national government, from the civil society, from the private sector. Hopefully in the future we will have more and more events like that to foster and enrich the dialogue around such an important issue for our sustainable development. Thank you so much, everyone. This is the end to our event. I would just move to our climate talks coordinator, Emina Sharaf, for an announcement, and I will say good evening and goodbye to everyone. Thank you.
Second, I know you want to finish and we go beyond the time, but one thing I want to focusing on in our subject today, that there is an gap between the who implement and who taking over the whatever the buildings, the infrastructure, and the gap in the integration between all these bodies make up a challenging for continuing. So this is the dialogue we are open with Ministry of Planning, because they are funding all these parties. So we tell them, when the project starts, you have to look after who will be responsible about the maintenance of this project. So and you allocate the enough budget to get the implementation continue in the same design they put it on. The second thing, it's raising during the event the capacity building and the awareness. And I'm unfortunately even for us who will going to buy and have a new settlement, we thinking about the view, we thinking about to have a lake, but we didn't think how our villa or our how to efficient will be this building, how we share to conserve and protect the environment. So I think we have to work on the message for the whole community on all level, not even the poor people only, but even all classes of the community. Thanks a lot. Very happy to share with you.
Thanks, Engineer Samah. Thank you so much for sharing this with us. Okay, everyone, have a good night, and thank you, Cairo Climate Talks, for inviting me to moderate this session. Thank you. It was a privilege. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you all.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Thanks a lot. Bye bye.
Bye.